On January 29, 2027, renters across the country can file a claim on $359.9 million. 37 property management companies are splitting that bill. And here's the part that should stop you. Every single one of them, in writing, denies doing anything wrong. Normally, I'd call that spin. This time, they might actually be telling the truth. None of those companies personally decided to raise your rent. They just all agreed to let the same piece of software do it for them. A program that pulled in what your neighbors were secretly paying and used it to figure out exactly how much more it could squeeze out of you. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual allegation in a federal antitrust case. And it's only half of what I want to show you today. Because there's a second group of people this is happening to right now, with no lawsuit, no settlement, and, as of this video, no law protecting them at all. By the end of this, you'll know exactly how a piece of software did something a room full of landlords could never legally do sitting across a table from each other, why a dozen states are now racing to ban it one at a time, and why 22 million Americans got left completely out of that fix. Let's start with the villain everybody already blames, because it's not the one doing the damage. Ask most people why rent is unaffordable, and you'll get the same answer. Wall Street bought up all the houses. It's satisfying. It's simple. It's also mostly a myth, at least at the scale people think. Institutional investors hold roughly 0.35% of single-family homes in the US. A company like Blackstone, the poster child for corporate landlords, owns about 0.06% of them. Small investors, people with 1 to 5 properties, actually account for 87% of all investor-owned homes in this country. And here's the twist nobody puts in the headline. Those big institutional buyers have been net sellers for 6 straight quarters. Their purchases are down more than 90% since 2022. They're leaving. So in January 2026, when the White House signed an executive order restricting large institutional buyers from purchasing single-family homes, it landed with perfect political timing and almost no practical effect, like banning a store from selling something it had already stopped stocking. If the big villain is walking out the door while your rent keeps climbing, something else is holding the door open. That's where this gets interesting. Picture 10 apartment complexes in the same city. Different owners, different companies, no meetings, no phone calls between them. And yet, month after month, they all raise rent by almost the same amount, at almost the same time. If 10 independent competitors did that in any other industry, regulators would call it exactly what it looks like: price fixing. The only reason it took years to prosecute here is that no human ever picked up a phone. A piece of software did it for them. That software has a name: RealPage. At its peak, it powered roughly 80% of the commercial revenue management market for multifamily housing in the US landlords, fed it their occupancy numbers and their pricing. RealPage fed back a recommended rent. Landlords who followed those recommendations too loosely, or undercut them, got flagged in industry group calls hosted by the company itself. In August 2024, the Department of Justice and 8 state attorneys general sued RealPage. DOJ's antitrust chief put it in 12 words that are still the cleanest summary of the whole case. RealPage was replacing competition with coordination, and renters paid the price. Here's how the case actually played out, and it's stranger than a simple guilty verdict. RealPage itself settled with the DOJ in November 2025. No fine, no admission of guilt, but a 7-year court-supervised decree restricting how it can use competitor data going forward. Meanwhile, the landlords who used the software kept getting picked off one at a time. Mid-America Apartment Communities agreed to pay $53 million. Camden Property Trust, another of the country's biggest apartment owners, agreed to the same amount. Dozens more property managers, together, are now splitting that $359.9 million settlement I opened with. Nobody went to prison. Nobody admitted a crime. And renters are still, right now, being told to file a claim form for money that's supposed to make up for years of coordinated overcharging. Here's what should actually worry you. This loophole wasn't a mistake in the law. It was a gap in it. Antitrust law was written for people shaking hands in smoke-filled rooms. It was never written for a shared piece of software quietly doing the handshake for everyone, all at once, at a scale no room could hold. States are now scrambling to close that gap, one legislature at a time. California rewrote its antitrust statute to ban this kind of pricing software outright, effective this year. New York passed the first law in the country specifically targeting algorithmic rent setting. RealPage sued to block it the day before it took effect. New Jersey signed its own version this July. Connecticut, Seattle, Berkeley. As of this summer, lawmakers in 21 states have introduced or passed some version of this ban. And then there's Colorado, which is the detail that tells you everything. Colorado's governor actually vetoed a bill banning this software in 2025. No statute, No new law, nothing on the books. 13 months later, Colorado's own Attorney General was still one of the states collecting a settlement from a landlord over the exact same conduct, using nothing but the antitrust law that was already there. You don't need a new law to make coordinated price fixing illegal. You just need someone willing to enforce the old one. That's the encouraging part of this story. Now here's the part with no encouraging ending yet. Everything you just heard applies to apartment renters. It does nothing for the 22 million Americans who live in manufactured home communities, what most people still call trailer parks. Here's why that distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. In an apartment, you can walk away from a bad landlord when the lease is up. In a manufactured home community, you usually own the house, but not the ground it sits on. Moving that house costs somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, often more than the home itself is worth. So when the lot rent goes up, you don't have a real option to leave. You just absorb it. Virginia Rubio found that out at 75 years old. She'd lived in the same mobile home park in Forks, Washington for almost 30 years, paying around $350 a month for her lot. Then the park changed hands. Her rent notice came in at $1,000 a month, nearly 3 times what she'd been paying, on an income of $860 a month in Social Security. She owns her home outright and still might lose it, because owning the house was never the part that was expensive. The land underneath it was. She's not an isolated case. Nationally, rents in these communities have climbed 45% over the past decade, and the pattern researchers keep finding is almost mechanical. Buy the park, raise the rent immediately, and eviction filings spike in the months right after. The firms doing this buying aren't obscure. Stockbridge Capital, Carlyle Group, and Apollo Global Management, some of the largest private equity names in the country, have all been active buyers of manufactured home communities over the past decade. And a striking share of those deals are financed through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the 2 government-backed lenders whose actual mission includes preserving affordable housing. The irony is almost too clean. Taxpayer-supported financing is helping fund the purchase of the very communities it's supposed to protect. There is no RealPage-style federal lawsuit here. There is no $360 million settlement fund. There is, as of December 2025, exactly 1 U.S. senator sending letters asking 6 investment firms to explain themselves. That's the entire scoreboard right now. Dozens of state laws for apartment renters, and a handful of strongly worded letters for the people with the least ability to just move away from the problem. Put these 2 stories side by side, and the difference isn't the harm. The harm is arguably worse in the mobile home parks. Older residents, fixed incomes, literally nowhere to go. The difference is leverage. Apartment renters are, on average, younger, more concentrated in cities, more online, and more likely to have the kind of visibility that turns into a class action law firm's inbox and a state legislator's desk. A 2022 investigative report on RealPage is what kicked off the whole legal chain that led to $360 million in settlements. It took one persistent newsroom and a coordinated fee structure that was easy to prove in court. Mobile home park residents are older, more rural, more likely to be on fixed incomes, and far less likely to have the same megaphone. Their harm is just as real and, in some ways, easier to prove. You can watch the eviction filings spike the month after a park sale like clockwork. But it hasn't produced the same wave of state legislation, because the people it's happening to have historically been the hardest group in America to organize politically. That's the actual lesson underneath both of these stories. The law doesn't move because harm exists. It moves when harm becomes visible to the people who write the laws. RealPage got fixed, imperfectly, slowly, but fixed, because renters had the numbers and the reach to make it impossible to ignore. Mobile home residents are still waiting for their version of that moment. So here's where this actually lands. If you're renting an apartment right now, you likely have more protection today than you did 18 months ago, and more is coming. Check whether your state is one of the 21 now considering a ban. Because if a landlord in your building is still using pricing software the way RealPage's clients were, you may have a real claim. If you know someone in a manufactured home community, that protection basically doesn't exist yet. The only lever that's moved anything so far, a Senate inquiry, happened because enough people made enough noise for one lawmaker's office to notice. Wall Street isn't the story here. It never really was. The story is that we already know how to fix coordinated price gouging when enough of the people affected can make themselves heard. And there's a huge group of homeowners in this country who still can't.